anything goes in this business right now. Because the way everyone is waiting around to see what the next big thing is in the internet and what the new business is going to look like. And it occurred to me at some point that you don't do it that way. You just do new things. That's how the next big thing happens, is people are already doing them. So when an artist has an idea, we will try it.
That was a peek into the mind of Louis Marks, visionary president of Ropeadope Records. He talks strategy in the new evolving music industry and a whole lot more in this first episode of Make Moves. 2, 3, 4. Well, hello out there, podcast people. How you doing? You're listening to the very first episode of Make Moves. My name's John Hammond. I'm going to be your host. If you'll just keep on listening, we'll be in this podcast thing together. In today's first episode, we're going to hear an interview with Louis Marks. Louis is the head of Ropeadope Records, which to me is one of the best record labels out there. It's a small independent label, but it is the label that could. They pull off things that other labels just can't seem to do. They consistently attract fascinating musicians. They turn them loose on cutting-edge projects and concepts, and what comes out is just a lot of great music. I'm really glad Louis could come on the show. So briefly, a little bit about how Louis wound up on Make Moves. A couple of years ago, I didn't even know who he was, actually. I just happened to find Ropeadope because I really appreciated the music that they were putting out. So I decided to call the president and CEO of Ropeadope, and that was Louis. I called him out of the blue. He didn't know who I was. I didn't have anything to offer him. There really was no purpose for the call other than I was curious. And yet Louis picked up the phone. He talked with me. He answered some questions. And I think that's just the kind of guy he is. And maybe that's some underlying philosophy in his way of running a record label, is take some chances on strangers and just see where it goes. In any case, when it was time for me to ask a first guest to come on to this podcast, I thought, who might say yes? Who is crazy enough to say yes? And Louis was the first person that popped into my mind. I can't tell you how thankful I am that Louis agreed to be the first interview, but rather than have me talk about the experience, let's just go hear interview number 1. Louis, are you on the other side?
I am.
Great. Thanks for being a part of this.
Thank you.
So you are the CEO of Ropeadope Records, and I'm a little bit curious how one winds up doing that. Is there a certificate program at the local community college, or what pathway did you head down to wind up where you are?
Interesting. Well, it very, very much an accidental arrival in this business. I was formally trained for the family business in frozen food and commodities trading, and left that after 10 years to listen to music, I suppose. Headed off for a while on tour with the Grateful Dead and other bands, working for Greenpeace, and that led me to the merchandising business, making T-shirts. And as I was raising a family, I built a clothing company that ended up, again, simply by relationship accident, by meeting people. We ended up in the early parts of this century when the internet was just, e-commerce was just coming into play, and that clothing company started doing merchandising for musicians, record labels. We did, Ropeadope was our first client. We did The Roots, we did Blue Note, OK Player, Def Jux, Daptone Records, and so on. And then as the music business went through its, the massive changes that it's gone through, I ended up investing in Ropeadope to help them survive, basically, as a small label. And that put me at the helm of Ropeadope Records.
Yeah,
No formal training.
That's not the normal path for sure. I'm a little curious. You sort of stepped into Ropeadope. It had a history and it has a present and it's got a little bit of a future. I'm pretty sure that you've got in mind. Could you maybe do a little bit of name dropping? Just who are some of the artists that represent a little bit of the history of your label and what you're doing right now?
Sure. Well, the label was founded in order to release a record by DJ Logic. That first record was Project Logic, and introduced Logic as a turntablist. I think before the term was anything, as an instrumentalist in a kind of a jazz band on the turntables. John Medeski was involved in that process, and I think because of the sort of impulsive nature of that, the Ropeadope model of just finding what's out there and allowing musicians to just make interesting and unusual records was kind of set. So that philosophy was ingrained from the very beginning of just let's put this unusual experiment out. So some of the first records that hit after Logic were the Philadelphia Experiment with Christian McBride, Yuri Kane and Questlove. The Detroit Experiment was another. Carl Craig did that. King Britt released the Sister Gertrude Morgan record. Sex Mob was in the mix back then. There's a Christian McBride record recorded live at Tonic in New York City, which was another sort of flagship, anything goes, put a bunch of artists in the room and see what happens kind of records. Tin Hat Trio was another and a good model of a style of music and a recording that didn't fit neatly in any particular genre or even label. Willie Nelson was on that first Tin Hat Trio record. Nora Jones was a regular in the mix back then, along on the Dirty Dozen Brass Band recordings. There are plenty more, but I think those are some of the strongest or the most well known out of the gate recordings in the early years of Ropeadope.
And how many artists do you have right now?
I don't have a count. I'm gonna guess that I'm gonna estimate about 160.
Oh wow!
It's an important distinction that as an independent record label with a different sort of model, we don't really sign artists to binding contracts. Mm-hmm. We license each record that is released. So artists are free to pop in, release a record with us, and then release records elsewhere on their own with other labels. It's really not. We don't sign artists. Mm-hmm. So that's why I hesitate to say how many, but I can say this: in the last 2.5 years, we've released about 120 mm-hmm. new records, and prior to that, about 110 in the earlier years.
Are there any sort of flagship names at this point that you think people would recognize or maybe want to investigate a little further?
Absolutely. Well, the one everyone is talking about, of course, is Snarky Puppy, a band that rose from obscurity to be a household name, it seems, at this point. There are so many important ones, but those that have more name recognition would be Snarky Puppy to start, and then the side projects from people in that band with snarky DNA, as they say. Shaun Martin out of Dallas, Robert Seawright. I am refreshing my memory as we looking through, because there is so much happening. Shayna Steele, Bill Dickens, most recently in the last year, Christian Scott, and Ghost Note, another snarky side project. And of course, our most recent announcement and probably most recognizable artist on Ropeadope for the entire history is Mr. Terrace Martin.
And well, I think we should circle back to Terrace soon, because I think what you're doing with him illustrates sort of the amount of flexibility you take with the artists. But yeah, those are all some heavy hitters right there. Ropeadope caught my eye because you just do things different. You wind up with different kinds of artists. And, I made some notes in my mind about the things that you're doing that are different. But I was wondering if I could just maybe say a few things and then get your reaction to it as how you think it's part of your model. Is that an acceptable approach? Mm-hmm. So, you've already mentioned it, but it seems like you put the music first and you're willing to take risks. I don't know if that, is that common in independent labels, or do they have a formula, or it seems to be a hallmark of what you're doing?
It's interesting. I think that it's a great question. I think that it was an early hallmark of Ropeadope to take some interesting risk and be the renegade. But as as the company has evolved and as the business has changed, that has become a much even bigger part of everything that we do. And I just want to illustrate that, or just state that artists in general are taking risks the minute the music comes out. And we have, each to a different degree, but there's a set of artists out there who are, especially in jazz, who are always pushing and trying to do something different, unusual, and putting down music that's coming to them that would be perceived as risky. All it really is just what they're hearing and what they're presenting, and so we're just a home for that. We allow it rather than trying to make it fit the market. So I guess that you might look at our catalog and say these are risky things, but it's really just kind of a natural function, and that's where we are. I have no clue. Well, I'd like to say that I have no clue what other labels do. I do get some information from time to time, but for the most part, because I did not grow up in this business, so to speak, and wasn't trained for it, I don't have a model. I don't have a template of what the business does or is supposed to be. So I guess it seems risky compared to others, or that others might not do this, but I don't really see I don't see inside the other labels.
I've listened to a lot of the albums that come out on your label. Most of them work, but I suppose some, if you take that many risks, some go sideways. What do you do when that happens, or what do you think? Right.
John, it's funny. These are great questions. That particular equation of whether they're sideways or not doesn't exist for us. Yes, we're thinking about how to keep the place open and how to continue to, market and brand and be a vibrant company, but we're not assessing a record based on financial or market success. Mm-hmm. I mean, look, it's at some point everybody's going to do that. They want their record to sell a lot of copies, but I think our measure very simply is if the music's cool, and the artist has realistic expectations in this market, and we reach some people, and the fans think it's cool, then every record is a success. And it's a given. I don't think there's ever anyone that has said, "Wow, those record sales really exceeded my expectations." I mean, we all have that, and it's a part of every early conversation that I have with artists, and that is, that it's going to be really hard to sell records, right? And their response is usually, "Yeah, I know. I just want to get my music out to the world and keep doing what I'm doing." So, reflecting on that, this is as difficult as the business is on a regular basis. We're in a luxurious position in that we don't have to measure each record by how many units it sold.
It's just about the vision, and is it striving for the next level?
That's right. Are we serving the artists well and helping them move forward, and really, are they able to continue to make another? Can they make another record?
Right.
I mean, as I'm answering your questions, it occurs to me that this business is misunderstood or not understood by a lot of people. It's funny, my sister called me yesterday and asked me about Terrace Martin, because he played at the White House, and she said, "Well, do you? That's the guy that you produce?" I was like, "No, we don't produce." So you book for him? I'm like, "No, we don't book." And she said the same thing that so many people that I know, my friends and family, say, and that is, what exactly do you do? And so the reason that I brought that up, and what I want to clarify, and it does tie into what is success or what's risky. We're just a piece at this point in the music business, and this is probably different than major labels, from what I've heard. We're just the sell the records part, or help the artist market by using the record part. They have touring income, they have teaching, some people have day jobs, some people many of our artists are performing musicians in other larger bands. Mm-hmm. So we're just a piece of that. So to tie it all, to finish that off and tie it all in, if we have supported them well and helped them continue their business, by doing the record part well, then we're successful.
Yeah.
And it's at each level. Somebody might have a debut record, and they may now move from only playing gigs in New York to playing more regionally or more nationally through the process of releasing the record and working with Ropeadope. That's great. And some people might go from playing to 100 people to playing to thousands, like Snarky Puppy has.
Yeah.
And that's success.
I saw them once with 9 people in the audience, and then I saw them at the Hollywood Bowl with, I don't know however many that holds, but it's tens of thousands. And, that happened, I think, pretty much a lot of it during their time with you.
We definitely were able to see, I can tell the Snarky Puppy story. I was in my office when I first, and I guess I had been here for a couple of years, and I got an email from a publicist who was really not a full-time publicist, was just somebody that was helping out Snarky Puppy. And she said, this band is playing in Philadelphia tonight. Would you like tickets to the show, and will you write a review? And I because we have a website that looks a little bit like a blog. She thought that that's what we did. So I called out to an intern who became an employee later. Interesting. From Temple University, who worked in the office, and I said, "Do you want to go see a show tonight?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, you have to write a review." And he said, "Okay, I'll write a review." So he went to the show and arrived at work the next morning stunned. And there were 5 people. I believe the show was at a place called The Fire in Philadelphia. And he was one of 5 people in the audience. And that's the moment that I sent somebody down to their upcoming recording at Dockside Studios, which was the Tell Your Friends record, and said, we should talk to these guys and see if we can work together. And I think that was a pretty normal experience for them at that point, outside of Dallas and Denton. In Europe, I think they had a little bit more, maybe 50 to 100 people at some of the key shows, maybe in Amsterdam and London. But yeah, that's where they were, and it's not like it took off immediately. It was they were in that zone for several years prior to the release of Family Dinner, Volume 1.
That's the one that got him the Grammy nod. Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah.
But the momentum from the ground up on that whole scene, I mean, Snarky Puppy did everything right, if you look back, and there's not one piece of the puzzle or a piece of where you can say, this is what did it. This is either the moment, and a longtime music business person asked me this the other day. What there has to be that one moment when everything changed, and there really wasn't. There was, Snarky Puppy toured relentlessly to rooms of 5 people, and they went back to markets, that normally a booking agent would say, well, we're not making money there, don't go back there. They went back there anyway. They recorded their music live, so it had some, interesting contrast to the way other records are made, and they had video for the entire thing. It was very unique, and we had our Ropeadope style of going direct to fans and trying to build community around a record. All of this is happening at the same time, and after a few years, it was between the album Ground Up and Family Dinner that the momentum really started to build. There's another little piece of it too I'll add in, is they did master classes. So they went to high schools and colleges, at lunchtime for just about, not every gig, but quite a few of their gigs. So, music students were getting to know Snarky Puppy, before 2010. Mm-hmm. And so several years later, these students, in my opinion, are all graduating. It's a new generation of music student, and they were familiar with the band. So now they're out at the shows.
Yeah.
Prior to then, they weren't allowed into the shows in the 21 Plus Club.
Right.
And so we saw in 2012, I'm trying to make sure I have the dates right. They would come to Philadelphia, and there was already a buzz. So, remember, we were very excited when they sold out upstairs at World Cafe Live, and that was 150 to 160 people. That was in the late spring of that year. 3 months later, and this is still prior to the Family Dinner release, they sold out the downstairs at World Cafe Live, which was 800 people.
Uh-huh.
So that momentum was already there going into that record. And then, of course, Family Dinner Volume 1 won a Grammy for the track Something with Layla Hathaway.
Yeah, pretty remarkable. This actually sort of leads me to another question that I want to bounce off of you. I actually overheard you talking with a musician not so long ago, and he kind of came to you with some ideas, and you just sort of, you didn't ask him too many questions. You just said, okay. Is that, I mean, there's a pretty high level of trust going on there, you know, for that conversation to go like that. Is that normal practice for you as well?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's an interesting mix of, we're in a business with a structure that didn't work or stopped working. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of the wild, wild west, as far as what ideas somebody brings to the table and the way that, the way you're supposed to do things. It's another part of it is, and I've learned this as I've been in this job. I'm not a musician. I have tremendous respect for anybody who can play anything. And I watch how hard they work and how much this is not really a choice. This is not a career choice for anyone. Here at Ropeadope, at least. The general philosophy or feeling that I get from that is, well, these are the leaders, Right. They're the ones that know how to do this. I will just follow along and work for them. And so it always starts with whatever the artist wants. And then, if I disagree, I'm going to say so, because my job is to be the person between them and the business, I suppose, and the fans. But it's part that philosophy, and it's part anything goes in this business right now. Because the way everyone is waiting around to see what the next big thing is in the internet and what the new business is going to look like. And it occurred to me at some point that you don't do it that way. You just do new things and see what happens. That's how the next big thing happens, is people are already doing them. So when an artist has an idea, we will try it.
Well, Lewis was kind enough to allow Make Moves to listen to some music off of the Ropeadope catalog. You're listening to Shaun Martin. This song is called One Big Party. It's off of his album 7 Summers. If you can't hear the joy in this, you need to get your ears checked. Sir, if I zoom out a little bit, I mean, not just artists. I noticed that you focus sometimes regionally on new pockets of great music and new talent, and it doesn't seem like you're trying to extract one person out of that community to make them the next new thing. It seems like you really go into that community to figure out what it is that's going on there, and maybe you find a ton of new music just by digging deeper and understanding it. How did you come up with that approach? I mean, you mentioned Dallas and Denton as one place, but you have these communities all over the place.
Right. Well, that's it's been an interesting path. It's been a journey, and it's evolved as we've gone. So I started by realizing that the artists, these musicians, know more about what good music is than any business person ever will. So why not let them be the A&R person and pick new musicians? What I found out pretty quickly is they're all somewhat interconnected, or there's a community, and the language is a little bit the same from community to community, and so many of them know each other in different places. Mm-hmm. It's a very interconnected business. So I think the first label was the first sub-label that. Am I getting ahead of myself on that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I get you. Maybe you should mention this strategy of having imprints underneath in the Ropeadope family. Right.
So the application of that was for an artist to go ahead and have their own imprint with all of the Ropeadope marketing and distribution and support. And they would pick the artists and the projects that were going to be released. Ground Up was the first, headed by Michael Lee of Snarky Puppy. And then we started to add a couple more because, people found out and were interested. But what happened along the way is that the how do I want to say that? How do I want to express that? I guess the philosophy and the mission, the goal, kind of evolved with it. So it became more than just, well, there's A&R, there's an A&R function that the artist is performing. Much of this was influenced by changes in the internet and looking at what's really happening in the world around the introduction of the internet. And I'm a student of this because I do believe that this technology is just fundamentally changing everything we do. And if you look around at other businesses, and as I looked around at other businesses, I started to see it as well, from education to education, like massive online open courses, to well, I'm not going to have a bunch of examples there, but I started to notice and study how the internet was changing our world. I read a couple of fantastic books. I read David Byrne's book, How Music Works, which sort of described his path and gave me a history of the existing changes within the music business. How it had evolved. There's some incredible examples in there of why punk rock worked as compared to classical symphonies, etc. And then I read a second book called Zero Marginal Cost Society by Jeremy Rifkin, and that described a grand vision of how the world was changing because of the internet. And I mean, it went way beyond any of my hunches and thoughts. So then I started to apply that thinking back to what we're doing in the music business. And I've always had, you can tell from the history of how I got here into the music business in the first place, I've always had a method in my life, which I discovered in retrospect, of just sort of following people and connections wherever they might lead. Mm-hmm. So at that point, when I visited Atlanta, for example, and I think that was a key moment. I was in Atlanta and I met several people who the reason I was in Atlanta was because a British gentleman, Brian Hurst from soulandjazz.com, who I don't even remember how I met him, but he said, come down to Atlanta. I'm going to be in the United States. And then he introduced me to a group of people in Atlanta from down at Edgewood Agents. Can't remember, the 800 East is the name of the studio, and I'm meeting all these people from the Atlanta music community, and they had all these wonderful connections, and they supported each other. And I thought, well, this is great. There should be, somebody should be representing them, or, we should tie them into the Ropeadope network and see how that works. And that's been a quite rewarding and fulfilling thing. And then it's just wherever I go, someone else will mention that they're connected with this person, and here's a nice, there's a great music community here. Richmond, Virginia, Yellowstone Records, Mexico City, Todd Clauser has many friends in the jazz community in Central and South America. New York City, I was meeting with one of our artists, and another fellow was there. His name's Billy Polo, and he's networked and working in the reggae community. So we had Prince Polo Records. So, we're literally building from the ground up what that grand vision of change is in this disruptive technology. I hope that makes sense to somebody, because by the time I got to the end of that, it started to not make sense to me. But I think you can feel that we are, I'm feeling my way through this. But I have this, I've said this many times, I feel like I'm in the room, I'm in this brand new room that is the future, but the lights are out and I can't really see everything clearly, but I'm kind of feeling my way around and it's starting to make sense.
Well, I know, it's the proof is in the pudding. I mean, you have these imprints, you have these regional hubs of music that you come up with. You let artists follow their nose, basically. All of it seems to work, and a lot of it comes together because you're willing to try new things. I don't think you can make all of those decisions and take all of those risks and expect the old model to deliver. And so it sounds like you're inventing the new model as you go. I think I'm just echoing that back at you, but for example, I noticed that you support artists with new types of dissemination. Christian Scott his album came out on as regular downloadable music, but there was also an app that was associated, and you roll with it.
Well, that's it. I mean, I do believe. Thank you for summing that up, because I do believe that everything is changing, and the old hierarchical structures of the music business and every other business and possibly government are changing because of the technology of the internet. And so it is fundamentally connecting people that makes that change to a more broad-based community. What's the term? Distributed collaborative network. And to do that, you have to just go. It's not that we are inventing it. We're just applying the model of connection to the existing networks that previously wouldn't have been fully connected. So that, you have the Dallas music scene, you have the Atlanta music scene. Some of them know each other, it's great, but mostly it's a community scene. So they're both doing exactly the same thing. Doesn't it enhance their power and strength and forward growth for them to be part of the same network? And isn't it important in that network that it is distributed and not hierarchical, meaning that someone is not determining fitting those communities into a larger model? It's just allowing those communities to do what they already do and enhancing their growth and strength by connecting them.
Yeah, I've noticed that you spend quite a bit of effort, facilitating connections among, between the artists, and I guess even the support networks for the artists. And some of that happens on a human level. I did some looking at your social media feeds, and I noticed the hashtag human to human. Well, first of all, what does that hashtag mean?
Well, that's it. It means that everything that I was just saying. It means direct communication between musicians and fans without going through the filter of the old music business. It's just connecting each other.
I wanted to just ask about two more things that I think you're doing really differently, and then leave a little space for you to tell me what I'm not catching with my own eyes. None of this works without a huge amount of trust on both sides of the equation. And it seems to be a little bit of the currency of Ropeadope. True, you have good marketing and I'm sure lots of great connections which help you succeed, but internally with the musicians and even just your business model, this doesn't work without trust. And I'm wondering, do you see it that way also? And if it is that way, how do you know when you can trust someone, or how are you building the trust over time? What do you do?
Interesting. Well, I mean, the first thing that hits me pretty regularly, and I'm in one of those cycles right now after watching, kind of reflecting on the label and some of the recent successes. I mean, just watching Terrace Martin performing at the White House put me in this mode. I'm very fortunate that these artists trust me. And I don't know if I can understand fully why. I mean, I think it has to do with what we just said about allowing them. I initially trust them as leaders. And I'm not placing the established business, this is the way it's done, in front of them at any moment. I'm asking them what I can do to help them. And I think that goes a long way. And I don't think that I sat down one day and say, if I do this, I will gain trust. It just is a natural occurrence. I really do respect them greatly, and I'm happy that and I feel obligated by that trust. So that's the starting point. Now there's the question, as the network ripples out and the people are connected, how do they trust each other in the business? And how to, so we definitely we do market in a way, very gently, that concept of human to human. We're all in it together. Let's trust each other, and do this. It's very comfortable when there's not a lot of money in it. I have to say that. We all live in a capitalist world right now, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that, except that sometimes people make bad decisions around money. So because there's less to lose and less to gain for artists nowadays, there's more of this common feeling of let's try to trust each other and see what we can put together. There's more of a team or community kind of vibe. And I hope that this new technology and this method and the things that I'm doing and the things that many other people are doing, not only help to build a different music business, but also help to build a better, build better citizens, so to speak, that do trust each other. The really cool thing about it, though, is it's not like a banking transaction. Actually, there are great parallels here with Bitcoin and blockchain technology, where the intermediary, the trustworthy intermediary, the one who has to verify the identity of all of the participants, isn't necessary anymore. And, the way our economy works, we're all led to believe that there has to be, a trustworthy person in between to verify everybody. And of course, it's in the best interest of that individual for everyone to not trust each other.
Yeah, right.
Otherwise, they don't need to be there. I hope it continues. Now, to the second part of my answer to that, if you'll indulge me here,
please,
that I am persistently wary of the larger business, of people who are in the music business because it's a career choice, or it's, but their primary goals are not necessarily in line with the primary goals of the artists and the music community. But once again, I'm very fortunate because we're a small label that I don't know that we're really at the table. So we don't really have to worry about that. But I as the CEO or head or whatever, owner of Ropeadope, am cautious of that for sure.
I can understand that caution. I don't think you're alone. I have to imagine that sometimes it feels like you're in a big ocean in a maybe not a small boat, but not a huge boat, and you have to be a little bit cautious. One other thing I noticed about something that you do with your artists, and I heard you say this once. I thought it was a fascinating quote. Independent artists aren't necessarily independent businesses. And I found it interesting that you trust them on an artistic level, and they trust you, and you do your alchemy and your magic together, but you also do things. Is it true that you help people learn to read spreadsheets and read statements? I mean, it seems like you're pretty transparent, and you want everyone to understand what's going on. Is that true?
I do, yeah. I mean, I don't do all those things yet. There are a couple of things that we do, and interestingly enough, we keep that in a private network, for the benefit of the community. But I want to build. I see that as our role as we grow, is to do more of that. I have private, personal discussions with artists about, how to run their businesses, what are good financial choices to make. I envision Ropeadope being a sort of an all-purpose support agency for artists in every way. And I mean, if someone calls me and has a question about publishing, and this has happened several times, when someone will say, well, I've got this great offer from XYZ, Incorporated, either publishing or record deal or whatever it is. And I will say, if you're comfortable with it and it's, okay with the other party, send me the contract and I'll tell you what to look out for. So I do advise and consult, but I'm limited with how much I can do. And of course, we're growing very rapidly, but we're limited in building these tools to support artists by financial restrictions at this moment. Mm-hmm. And I think that, and we're busy by the flood of new music that is coming our way. But I'm looking forward to a time, hopefully, when we can have the funding and build out more tools for artists. Because if you want to build a great business as an artist, there are classic examples right now where everyone's talking about Prince's, methods in the music business, and of course, many of us have seen the movie Ray, where he decides to own his own masters. I mean, if you don't know enough about your business first, then you're vulnerable to people who do know about business but might not have your best interest at heart. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a next step. We're doing some of it now with our limits, but the next step is to really have better tools for artists to be businessmen or business people as much as they need to in order to know how to not get taken advantage of. Just like any other business, I would say.
As far as, you as a human, you're, in a lot of ways, it's my opinion that you're really heading in a new direction, and what you're doing isn't totally understood to the larger world. Maybe even sometimes internally we don't know what we're doing. But it sounds like when you're really pushing in a new direction, not everybody understands what you're setting out to do. And I'm sort of wondering, where as a person do you feel most misunderstood in all of this?
That's that question, John. That's the big one. I think that, I'm going to take it as a business first, as the company itself. I think that people like to categorize. Not finding fault with anyone in general, but the most of what happens in our world is that people learn a template and they follow that template, and that, of course, is the enemy of growth and change a lot of the time. And so I don't, I've actually had a person say to me, when is Ropeadope going to grow up, as a reference to, when are you going to be like everybody else? Because this is the way you do it. Presuming, of course, the underlying point there is that we want to, have platinum records and be in the same club and table as, that the natural progression of what we're doing is to make more money and be bigger. So that's a fundamental misunderstanding of who Ropeadope is and who I am as an individual. To reiterate, the presumption is that, Louis Marks wants, to have, to be a major label, or to make a ton of money at this. So that's a misunderstanding. The other thing where I feel misunderstood, and it's the same thing, it's just another part of it, and that is, well, if Ropeadope's a small label and Universal is a big successful label, then clearly the people at Universal must be smarter and fundamentally better at what they do than Louis Marks and Ropeadope. So I don't know if that's misunderstood. I think it's possibly underestimated. And I think, I don't know that those people who do that necessarily are even paying that much attention to me. They're just looking at it going, well, if it's a small label, then there must be a reason. And that reason probably is you're not that great at what you do, and we surprise them. I do think that there's an element of surprise every time something strong happens over here. They're like, how did that happen? How did he do that? And then there must be something going on behind the scenes. So that's a fundamental misunderstanding.
I'm a little bit curious. You said you're not inventing the future. You're just doing new things. When you're not busy doing new things, who or where are you learning from the most? Where are you drawing your thoughts? I mean, you mentioned the Rifkin book, and are there other people or places that you look to for inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I look to Thich Nhat Hanh for inspiration. Um, Jeremy Rifkin for sure. David Byrne, I mentioned, is another. And then, in our content world or the internet world, I'm always looking for that thing that looks a little different, that I don't understand and people don't understand. And the people that are working with Bitcoin and blockchain technology and, every little startup that's trying something that just seems so absurd and new, that's the inspiration. It's funny, and it's out of necessity in a lot of ways. I mean, I remember when Bandcamp first came out, I was just like, well, we'll just jump on that. Just do it, So each, there's no one leader. There are different leaders all over the place, and a lot of it is trying by doing. But there's some pretty intelligent people out there that are trying new things. Elon Musk, I'm going to have to say, is a persistent inspiration to me, because he just says the most outrageous things, and where you just realize that he's thinking on a level that none of us are thinking on. I mean, I read an article yesterday where he said we need to just be able to get off this planet soon. And I don't know why he said soon, and most people are going to interpret it as, oh my God, something, we're all going to die. But what was amazing to me is that he just thinks it's possible. This is, as a matter of fact, he's just like, yeah, we should just, detonate some nuclear bombs over Mars and warm the planet up and go live there. I think he's not building a thing, like a capsule to send some people out on an exploratory mission to Mars. He's working on building transporters to move 1 million people to Mars. And I just, forget, I'm not lost in, well, is that a good idea? Why? I'm just going to listen to this guy to hear what he has to say, because no one I know thinks like that.
Yeah, I think sometimes people they're crazy until proven right.
Bingo. Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to be crazy until proven right.
Well, actually, my last question that I wanted to ask, after that, I'll just leave it open for you to tell me things that I forgot to ask you about. It seems like there's easier ways to make money. You mentioned other templates and other models, and it sounds like, you could have had a career in processed foods, or you had a career in, merchandise and apparel and attire and whatnot. But still, you show up every day, and I think you probably do show up every single day, and you just go the extra mile to innovate in this field that you sort of stumbled into. Given that there's easier ways, why do you just keep pushing in this direction?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why I didn't choose other businesses. The safe path, my family business, which is absurdly successful, which I was to be the next leader. Personally, I think it's a combination of it didn't feel right, and I don't, maybe low self-esteem or something. And of course, the entire counterculture that I fell in love with. But necessity, I guess. And then, it's funny. I mean, I've been looking my whole life for what I'm going to be when I grow up. And I'm going to bring it back to like these people. I mean, I'm so fortunate. My day, forget the tedious stuff that I have to do and working 7 days and constantly, being under pressure. The rest of my day is talking to, some of the greatest musicians on the planet, and also great humans, very humble people. There's really not anybody in our mix, that isn't getting the same vibe of, music is a transformational thing. It has power to heal. It has power to unite people. And so that's who I get to hang with. And some of them actually think I'm cool. So that's amazing to me. So I feel like I'm home. I really do. And I feel like finally, like I feel like the bizarre path that I've taken from business to music it gives me a pretty unique skill set. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm in the place where this strange set of skills that I have based on who I am and also what my upbringing was are the right mix. I mean, I wish I was a musician. I've always wished I was in a more creative field, but I also have some business skills, so I can devote to music and to art, but also know how to do these other things. And as I've learned that, I've noticed that there are a lot of other people doing the same thing. I think some of the newer labels that we've brought out, like Artists First in Philadelphia, run by Melody Forrester, probably one of, I don't know, a handful of now black woman-owned record labels. Same type of individual, dedicated to the music, but has this other skill in the business world. And I don't, I forgot the question, but hopefully the answer was in there.
Yeah, I think the answer's in there. You just sound, it sounds like you are possessed and maybe positioned by something bigger than you to be doing what you're doing. And, I was curious, why do you do it? And it almost doesn't sound like that's a question that even registers in your head. And,
It is serving something bigger. There's no doubt. I haven't seen. Thank you for that clarity, because I really, as I bounced around, I worked on the New York Mercantile Exchange. I worked in the Philadelphia Stock Exchange, the New York Stock Exchange. I never found anything that felt much bigger than me that was worth serving until I got here.
I think we should close it up there. That's a wonderful statement to hear. And, outside of my questions, I'm curious, is there something that I should have been asking you that I just totally missed it because I'm dense?
No, John, I don't think so. I don't, that's, just taking inventory here. I think we covered a lot of ground. Those are all great questions that certainly challenged me to answer, and also, thank you, helped me understand a little bit more about what motivates me and why I'm doing this. I don't often stop to think about these things.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you about this. I can't thank you enough. And I'm looking forward to talking to you more in the future.
You got it. Thanks so much, John. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty excited. Episode 1 is coming to a real nice close here. I think we had a nice interview to listen to. Super grateful to Lewis for coming on the show. I appreciate Ropeadope letting us play some of Shaun Martin's album for you. You should go check out ropeadope.com. I think you'll enjoy some of the goodies you find there. In the next episode, we're going to have Richard Ross. He's a famous photographer, an artist, a Guggenheim Fellow, a professor at the University of California. The guy's a hoot. He's a little bit nuts. I think you'll love some of the stuff he has to say. Until then, I'm signing out. I hope you get out there and make some moves.